Beneath the towering silhouettes of ancient pines, where the moss grows thick and the twilight mist weaves between the trees like drifting spirits, there exists a legend that refuses to fade. It is a creature whispered about in remote cabins, spoken of around crackling campfires, and feared by hikers who swear the woods watch them back. Bigfoot, an icon of mystery, a symbol of the unknown, and perhaps the most famous cryptid ever woven into the fabric of North American folklore. Tonight, we step into that world. In this episode of Bigfoot Encounters Radio, we follow the chilling, gripping, and astonishing real stories of people who walked into the forest and came out believing that something enormous, intelligent, and alive is still roaming the wild. Whether you believe wholeheartedly or remain cautiously skeptical, these stories will make you question how much we truly know about the world around us. Our first account comes from a trucker named Dale, a man with hands like shovels and a voice weathered by years on the road. He wasn't the type to scare easily. He'd driven through empty deserts, icy mountain passes, and stretches of wilderness where even radio signals refused to exist. But nothing prepared him for the night he encountered something that changed him forever. It was early autumn, the kind of night when fog clings low to the road and the chill hints at winter's approach. Dale had pulled his rig onto a Forest Service route to rest. No towns for miles, just an ocean of trees and the occasional hoot of an owl. As he swapped out his boots for something more comfortable, he heard what he thought was a branch snapping. Then another, then a third, heavier, closer. Thinking maybe a bear was scavenging, he reached for his flashlight and stepped outside. What he saw made his blood turn to ice. Standing just beyond the glow of his headlights was a figure the size of a grizzly, but unmistakably upright. Its shoulders were massive, its arms long enough to reach almost to its knees. Its fur, yes, fur, hung in matted clumps, wet from the mist. But the moment that haunted him most wasn't the creature's shape or size, it was its eyes. They reflected the light like those of a predator, yet they held something chillingly human: curiosity, intelligence, and a warning. For a long 5 seconds, neither moved. Then, with a deep, guttural sound that vibrated Dale's ribs, the creature turned and melted into the darkness between the trees, silent as a ghost. Dale quit trucking in that region entirely. He said the forest changed after that night, as if it suddenly felt too alive. Our second story takes us to the Pacific Northwest, where dense forests sprawl endlessly and where Bigfoot sightings are practically woven into local identity. A young couple, Jenna and Mark, had been camping for the weekend near a secluded lake, clear water, starlit skies, and a peacefulness they couldn't find in the city. On their second night, nature's calm was broken by something powerful enough to shake their tent. At first, they thought it was thunder, but the sky above them was cloudless. Then came a howl, long, rising, unlike any animal they'd ever heard. Not wolf, not bear, not elk. This sound was deeper, resonant, something primal that raised every hair on their bodies. Mark, trying to be brave, unzipped the tent and shone his flashlight into the woods. That's when they saw it, something large moving between the trees, pacing, observing. Not charging, not attacking, simply watching them with unmistakable intent. Jenna swore she saw a face, dark, hulking, with deep-set eyes that glinted in the beam of the light. They didn't sleep that night. At dawn, they hurried to pack, but when Mark walked to their truck, he froze. On the side of the vehicle, embedded in the layer of dew and dirt, was a handprint. But this wasn't the print of any human. It was at least twice the size, with fingers so long they stretched nearly across the width of the window. And the strangest part, there were only 4 fingers. They left immediately. Their romantic weekend turned into a tale they still refused to tell at gatherings for fear of being mocked. But whenever anyone asks why they no longer camp, Jenna's eyes harden, and she quietly changes the subject. Another chilling testimony comes from a forest ranger named Amelia, who spent years monitoring wildlife and assisting lost hikers. She was rational, trained, and not one to believe in legends. That changed one winter afternoon. Snow fell heavily that day, blanketing everything in a thick, muffled quiet. Amelia was patrolling a remote area after reports of strange noises. She noticed tracks, massive impressions that walked in a straight line, one foot directly in front of the other, much like a human stride. Bears don't walk that way. No animal in those woods does. The tracks were so fresh that the snow around them hadn't even begun to settle. As she followed the trail, the forest seemed to grow eerily still. No birds, no rustling, nothing. It was as if the trees themselves held their breath. Eventually, the tracks led to a ravine where the sound of running water echoed. Peering through the falling snow, she saw a shape crouched near the creek. It was enormous, covered in thick brown hair, and scooping water with cupped hands. For a moment, she felt as though she was witnessing something ancient, something that didn't want to be seen but no longer cared. A twig snapped beneath her boot, and the creature's head turned sharply in her direction. For just a heartbeat, their eyes locked. Intelligence radiated from that stare, but also something else, an awareness that she was out of her element, a visitor in its world. Then, with astonishing speed for its size, it bounded across the creek and disappeared up the slope, leaving Amelia shaken and forever changed. She later admitted that although she couldn't officially report what she saw, she now understands why some people vanish in these vast forests without a trace. A fourth encounter comes from a group of college friends who went hiking during their spring break. They were young, carefree, and eager to explore the outdoors. On their second night, they gathered around a fire, laughing and telling stories, when suddenly the forest fell silent. No insects, no wind, nothing. A deep unease settled over them. Then, from somewhere beyond the tree line, came heavy, deliberate footsteps. Not the scattered, uneven sounds of an animal, but the steady rhythm of something walking upright. As the footsteps drew closer, one of the friends, Tyler, pointed his flashlight toward the sound. The beam caught the edge of something massive, something that moved with purpose. The group panicked. They huddled together, whispering in terror as the footsteps circled their campsite. At one point, a rock larger than a grown man could lift sailed through the air and crashed against a nearby tree. That was the moment they realized they weren't dealing with a curious animal but something demonstrating dominance, something telling them they weren't welcome. They left at sunrise, abandoning their tent, gear, and most of their belongings. Later, when authorities retrieved the items, they found the tent shredded, not by claws or teeth, but by force, as if something had ripped it apart with bare hands. Our final story might be the most unsettling because it didn't take place deep in the wilderness. It happened near a small rural town in the Appalachian region, where forests meet farms and people are used to the sounds of nature. An elderly man named Harold lived alone in a wooden cabin on the outskirts, the kind of place where days felt long and nights felt endless. One evening, just after sunset, he heard something rummaging near his chicken coop. Thinking it was a fox, he grabbed his lantern and stepped outside. What he saw still haunts those who heard his retelling. Standing at the edge of the co-op was a towering figure covered in dark, tangled hair. Its shoulders rose and fell with heavy breaths, and in its hands with long, thick fingers, it held one of Harold's chickens, completely unharmed but pinned gently as though being examined. When Harold gasped, the creature turned. It didn't snarl or attack. Instead, it stared at him with a look that could only be described as ancient curiosity, as if studying him the same way a human might study a wild animal. After a long moment, the creature placed the chicken back inside the coop and stepped backward into the woods, never breaking eye contact. Harold said it felt less like a monster and more like an old guardian of the forest, wandering through a world it no longer fully understood. These stories, though different in setting, share one undeniable thread: the sense that something out there walks the line between myth and reality. Something large, powerful, intelligent, and elusive. Something that may not want to harm us but wants to stay hidden, watching from the shadows as humans venture deeper into its domain. Whether Bigfoot is a surviving relic of ancient hominids, an undiscovered species, or simply a legend fueled by imagination, one thing is certain: the encounters are too many, too consistent, and too compelling to ignore. As we step back from the edge of the unknown, one question lingers: what would you do if you found yourself standing in the silent woods, the moon overhead, and the sound of heavy footsteps approaching through the darkness? Would you run, freeze, or simply stand in awe of a creature that defies explanation? One thing is clear: Bigfoot's legend endures not because we've proven its existence, but because the world is still far more mysterious than we dare to imagine. And as long as the forests remain deep and the nights remain silent, stories like these will continue to drift through the wilderness, waiting for those brave enough to listen.